She inherited an orchard from a woman she never met. The locked barn held a fortune. For anyone out there who's ever felt like their life was written for them by someone else, that they were just a name in a file, I hope you'll stick around for this. Maybe even hit that subscribe button, because this story is for you. It's my story. It began on the morning of my 18th birthday, which also happened to be my last day at the St. Jude's Home for Girls. There was no cake, no party, just a thin manila envelope on the corner of my cot when I woke up. Inside was a bus ticket to the county seat, a $50 bill, and a form letter wishing me success in my future endeavors. 18 years, summarized by a staple and a cheap paperclip. For 2 years, I've been counting the days to this moment, imagining freedom would taste like clean air and possibility. Instead, it tasted like the stale dust in the corridor. Freedom, it turned out, was just another word for being alone. I packed my life into a single black duffel bag. It wasn't hard. A few changes of clothes, a worn copy of a book I'd read a dozen times, and a small, smooth stone I'd carried since I was a kid. I didn't know where it came from. It was just always there, a solid piece of a past I couldn't remember. Mrs. Gable, the house mother, stood by the door, her arms crossed. Her face was a permanent mask of weary disapproval. "The bus leaves at 10, she said, not as a reminder, but as an eviction notice. She didn't wish me luck. She just checked her watch. I walked out the heavy steel-enforced door without looking back. I had been a ward of the state for as long as I could remember. A file number, a case study in abandonment. Now I was just a person with $50 and a bus ticket to nowhere specific. The county building was exactly as soulless as I'd imagined. Gray linoleum floors, buzzing fluorescent lights, and the smell of old paper and quiet desperation. I was directed to a small office on the 3rd floor, room 3B. The door said Davies and Associates, Legal Services. I figured this was where they finalized my paperwork, officially cutting the cord between me and the system that had been my reluctant parent. I knocked. A calm voice said, "Come in." The man behind the desk was older, with kind eyes crinkled at the corners and a tweed jacket that looked a decade out of style, but comfortable. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Maya," he said, his voice softer than I expected. "I'm Arthur Davies. We have some things to discuss." He wasn't a social worker. The papers on his desk were thick, bound with string, looking ancient and important. My heart started a low, nervous drumbeat against my ribs. This wasn't standard procedure. Am I in some kind of trouble? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It was the default question for a kid like me. Trouble was the air we breathed. He gave me a small, sad smile. "No, Maya. Quite the opposite. I believe." He slid a heavy document across the polished surface of his desk. It was a will. My stomach clenched. Wills meant someone had died. For kids in the system, that usually meant the final, official confirmation that you were truly on your own. But I already knew that. "I don't understand," I said. "I don't have any family." "That's not entirely true," Mr. Davies said gently. He tapped a line on the front page. "This is the last will and testament of Eleanor Vance. She passed away 3 months ago. She left her entire estate to you." I stared at the name. Eleanor Vance. It meant nothing to me. A blank space. "I've never heard of her," I said, the words feeling hollow and stupid in the quiet room. "There must be a mistake. Maybe there's another Maya." He shook his head slowly. "There's no mistake. It's very specific. Maya Alistair, born on this day 18 years ago. It's you?" He pushed another, smaller envelope toward me. My name was written on the front in elegant, looping cursive. Inside was a single, heavy, old-fashioned iron key and a deed. A deed to a property in a town I'd never heard of, Northwood Creek. Eleanor Vance owned a small farm, Mr. Davies explained. About 30 acres. An apple orchard, a house, and a barn. "It's all yours now." The room seemed to tilt. An orchard, a house. Words that belonged in books, not in my life. I had never had a room to myself, let alone a whole house. The world I knew was made of bunk beds, shared bathrooms, and doors that locked from the outside. "Why?" I managed to ask. "Why would a stranger leave me all this?" Mr. Davies leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. That is the question, isn't it? Eleanor was a very private woman. I was her lawyer for the last 20 years, and she rarely spoke of her personal life. She instructed me to find you upon your 18th birthday and deliver this. She left no explanation in the will itself. He paused, his gaze steady. There is one other thing you should know. The property is isolated. It's been neglected for some time, and there is a standing offer to purchase the land from a development corporation. A significant offer, enough to set you up for life, anywhere you wanted to go. The $50 bill in my pocket felt like a joke. A life-changing sum of money, dangled in front of a girl who had never had more than $100 to her name. It was an escape hatch, a way out of the uncertainty that was pressing in on me. I could take the money and disappear. Start over. Be anonymous. It was everything I thought I wanted. But then my fingers brushed against the cold, heavy iron of the key. It felt real. Solid. It was a key to a place that was mine. What should I do? The question slipped out before I could stop it. It was a child's question. I was supposed to be an adult now. Mr. Davies looked at me, his expression unreadable. Eleanor wanted you to have a choice. You can sell the property without ever setting foot on it. The papers can be signed by the end of the week. Or, he said, pushing a bus schedule across the desk, you can go see it for yourself. The bus to Northwood Creek leaves this afternoon. He wasn't telling me what to do. He was just laying out the paths. For the first time in my life, the path I took was up to me. I looked at the key in my hand, its teeth worn smooth with time. It was a key to a mystery, and I realized, sitting in that sterile office, that I was tired of running from the blank spaces in my life. I wanted to fill one in. I'll take the bus ticket, I said. The bus ride was 6 hours long, moving from the dense, gray grid of the city to the rolling green hills of the countryside. I watched the world transform through the grimy window. Concrete and steel gave way to fields of corn, dense forests, and small towns that looked like they hadn't changed in a century. With every mile, the knot of anxiety in my stomach loosened, replaced by a strange, fragile sense of anticipation. I was traveling toward a past I didn't know I had, toward a future I couldn't imagine. I clutched the duffel bag on my lap, the key a heavy weight in my pocket. Eleanor Vance. The name echoed in my mind. Who was she, and why me? The system had taught me that nothing was ever free. Every kindness had a price. Every gift had strings attached. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was some kind of test, or worse, a trap. The bus pulled into Northwood Creek just as the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The town was little more than a single main street with a grocery store, a diner, a post office, and a handful of other shops. People on the sidewalk moved slowly, nodding to each other. It was the kind of quiet, settled place I'd only seen in movies. I was an outsider, a ghost. My black boots and worn jacket felt like a costume against the town's faded, comfortable backdrop. I asked the driver, a cheerful man with a thick gray mustache, for directions to the Vance property. He gave me a curious look. Old Eleanor's place? It's a good 2-mile walk up the county road. You sure you're headed there? Nobody's been out that way in months. I just nodded, thanked him, and started walking. The air was different here. It smelled of damp earth, cut grass, and something sweet like blossoms. The road wound uphill, away from the small cluster of town lights. Soon, I was surrounded by the sounds of the evening, the chirping of crickets, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. It should have been peaceful, but it was a lonely sound. The loneliness of the group home was loud, a constant hum of other people's lives pressing in on you. This was a different kind, a deep, vast quiet that made me feel incredibly small. I saw it just as the last light was fading. A rusted mailbox, half hidden by overgrown weeds, with the name Vance barely visible. A gravel driveway led into a dark tangle of trees. This was it. I took a deep breath and walked up the drive. The trees opened up into a clearing, and I saw the house. It was a small, simple farmhouse, its white paint peeling, its porch sagging on one side like a tired old man. To the left, rows and rows of apple trees stood in crooked, silent ranks, their branches heavy and tangled. The orchard, beyond the house, set back near the edge of the woods, was a large, dark barn. Its doors were shut tight, and a heavy, rusty lock hung from the latch. It looked imposing, secretive. My house. The thought was so alien, so absurd, I almost laughed. It looked haunted, but the key in my pocket felt warm. I walked up the creaking wooden steps of the porch and stood before the front door. The paint was cracked, the wood weathered, but it was solid. I slid the iron key into the lock. It resisted for a moment, then turned with a loud, grating click that echoed in the twilight quiet. The door swung inward on a groan of old hinges, releasing a wave of stale, musty air. The air of a place that had been holding its breath for a very long time. I stepped inside, my boots loud on the wooden floorboards. The interior was dark, filled with hulking shapes that I knew were furniture covered in white sheets, like a congregation of ghosts. Moonlight filtered through the dirty windows, casting long, distorted shadows. I fumbled along the wall until my fingers found a light switch. I flicked it, not expecting anything to happen. But to my surprise, a single bare bulb in the center of the ceiling flickered to life, casting a weak, yellow glow over the room. It was a living room, a sagging sofa, a couple of armchairs, a stone fireplace, all shrouded in white. Dust motes danced in the pale light. It was a time capsule. A life paused. I dropped my duffel bag by the door. The silence in the house was absolute. It wasn't empty. It was waiting. I walked through the small downstairs area. A kitchen with old-fashioned appliances and a thick layer of dust on every surface. A small dining area with a round wooden table. Everything was neat, just abandoned. I found a narrow staircase and climbed it, each step groaning in protest. Upstairs, there were two small bedrooms. One was empty, save for a simple bed frame. The other was clearly Eleanor's. A handmade quilt was folded neatly at the foot of the bed. A wooden rocking chair sat by the window, overlooking the dark orchard. On the nightstand, a pair of reading glasses lay next to a book, as if she'd just set them down and planned to be right back. That first night, I didn't unpack. I didn't even take off my jacket. I sat in that rocking chair, staring out at the skeletal silhouettes of the apple trees, and I felt a profound sense of dislocation. I was a trespasser in my own life. Who was this woman who had lived here, in this quiet solitude, who read books in this chair and looked out at this same view? And why had she chosen me, a girl from a world of concrete and paperwork, to inherit this place of earth and roots? The offer from the developers felt like a siren song. I could take the money and run. Buy a clean, new apartment in a city where no one knew me. No dust, no ghosts, no questions. But something held me there. It was the quiet dignity of the house, the silent promise of the land. It felt like if I left, I'd be abandoning something important, something more than just property. I'd be abandoning a chance to understand. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without the familiar sounds of sirens and shouting. I slept to the sound of the wind in the apple trees, and I dreamed of a woman I'd never met, her face always in shadow. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the dusty window pane, illuminating the room in a way that made it seem less sad and more peaceful. The task ahead felt monumental. I needed answers. If Eleanor hadn't left an explanation with the lawyer, maybe she'd left one here in the house. I decided to start a methodical search, room by room. I started with the living room, pulling the white sheets off the furniture. Underneath, the pieces were old but well-made. A sturdy oak coffee table, a floral sofa that was faded but not torn. It was a house that had been cared for. In the corner stood a tall, roll-top desk. It was locked. I tried to jiggle it open, but it was no use. After a frustrating search through the kitchen drawers for anything that could pick a lock, I found a small, decorative key hanging on a hook next to the pantry, labeled desk. It fit perfectly. With a creak, the wooden top rolled back, revealing a dozen small compartments and drawers, filled with old pens, stacks of paper, and receipt books. It was the administrative heart of the farm. I pulled open the drawers one by one. Old bills, seed catalogs, farm ledgers with neat, precise handwriting detailing crop yields from years past. It was a glimpse into Eleanor's life, but it wasn't what I was looking for. Then, in the largest central drawer, I found it. A heavy, gray metal box. It wasn't locked. I lifted the lid, my heart pounding. Inside, there was no money, no jewelry. Just a thick stack of envelopes, tied together with a piece of faded twine. They were addressed to me. Not to my Alistair, but to my little sparrow. My hands trembled as I lifted the stack out of the box. The paper was thick and creamy, the ink slightly faded. I untied the twine and looked at the first envelope. There was no date. I carefully opened it and unfolded the letter inside. The same elegant, looping cursive from the envelope Mr. Davies had given me filled the page. "My dearest little sparrow," it began. "If you are reading this, then it means I am gone, and you have come home. I know you must have so many questions. You do not know my name, and yet I have known yours since the day you were born. I imagine you are standing in this old house, a stranger in a strange land, wondering what cosmic mistake has brought you here. It was no mistake, my dear. It was a promise." I had to sit down. I sank into one of the dusty armchairs, the letter shaking in my hand. "My name is Eleanor Vance, and I knew your mother. Her name was Sarah. She was my dearest friend, closer to me than a sister. She was bright and fierce, and she loved you more than anything in this world. But the world was not kind to her. She was young, and she was alone, and she was struggling. When you were just a baby, she got sick, very sick. Before she passed, she made me promise one thing, that I would watch over you, that I would make sure you were safe." I read the words again and again. My mother, Sarah. The file I was allowed to see once was thin, clinical. It said she had relinquished her parental rights. It said she was unable to care for me. It never said she was sick. It never said she loved me. "I tried to adopt you," the letter continued. "I fought for months. But the system, in its infinite and cold wisdom, decided I was too old, too single, a farmer with an unstable income. They denied my application. They said you would be better off in their care, waiting for a proper family. I was heartbroken. It was the greatest failure of my life. So I made a new promise, a secret one. I couldn't be your mother, so I would be your guardian angel. I followed your life from a distance, through caseworkers who were sometimes kind and sometimes not. I couldn't intervene directly. It would have violated the court's orders, and I might have lost any chance of knowing where you were. So I waited. I worked this land. I saved every penny I could. I built this place not just for me, but for you. I wanted to give you something no one could ever take away. A piece of the earth, a place to stand, a home." Tears were streaming down my face, dripping onto the old paper. All my life, I had believed a story of abandonment. I was the girl who was given away, the child who wasn't wanted. But this letter, this voice from the past, was telling me a different story. A story of love, of struggle, of a fierce and secret protection that had been wrapped around me my entire life without my knowledge. Eleanor Vance wasn't a stranger. She was the keeper of my mother's promise. She was the only family I had ever truly had, and I had never even known her name. I looked around the dusty room, at the shrouded furniture and the quiet, waiting spaces. It wasn't a haunted house anymore. It was a sanctuary. It was the end of a long, silent vigil. It was my home, and I had a choice to make. The weight of those letters settled over me like a physical thing. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, reading them one by one. They weren't chronological, but more like entries in a journal, each one a snapshot of Eleanor's life and her thoughts about me. She wrote about the orchard, how she planted a new tree for every one of my birthdays. She wrote about my mother, sharing small memories of her laughter, her stubbornness, her dream of being an artist. With every page, the ghost of Eleanor Vance became a real person, and the mother I never knew became more than just a name and file. She became Sarah. In one letter, Eleanor wrote about the developers. They've been circling for years, like vultures. They see this land as a commodity, a blank slate for their ugly, identical houses. They don't see the soil your great-grandfather tilled. They don't see the ancient apple trees that have fed generations. They see profit. They will make you an offer, a tempting one. They will promise you an easy life. Do not be fooled, little sparrow. The easiest path is rarely the one that leads to your own heart. Her words felt like a direct warning. The next morning, my phone, which had been silent for days, rang. It was Mr. Davies. Maya, I'm just calling to check in. Have you arrived safely? His voice was calm and professional, a stark contrast to the emotional whirlwind I was living in. Yes, I said, my voice hoarse. I'm here. Good. I also have an update for you. The representatives from Oakview Development called again this morning. They've increased their offer substantially. They're prepared to wire the funds as soon as you sign. It's a very generous number, Maya. Enough to buy a home anywhere, pay for a college education, travel the world. It would mean you wouldn't have to worry about money for a very, very long time. I looked out the kitchen window at the overgrown orchard. The morning light was soft, making the dew on the long grass glitter. I could see the work that needed to be done. The peeling paint on the house, the tangled branches of the trees, the leaky-looking roof on the barn. It was overwhelming. The money was a clean slate. A ticket out. For a moment, I let myself imagine it. A new apartment, new clothes, a life where I didn't have to fix a single thing. A life free from the weight of this history, this responsibility. The temptation was a physical ache. It was the smart choice, the logical choice. Maya, are you still there? Mr. Davies asked. I'm here, I whispered. I need to think about it. After I hung up, I felt a wave of panic. I was 18 years old. I knew how to survive in an institution, how to make myself small and invisible. I didn't know how to fix a house. I didn't know the first thing about running an orchard. The developers weren't vultures. They were offering a rescue raft. Selling was the only sane option. I put on my boots and walked out into the orchard, the grass cold and wet against my jeans. I walked between the rows of gnarled, ancient trees. Their bark was rough under my fingertips. I reached up and touched a small, green apple, still weeks from being ripe. This was real. This soil, these trees. This was what Eleanor had saved for me. It was what my mother had wanted for me. I thought about the kids back at St. Jude's. Most of them, when they aged out, would be lucky to find a room in a shared apartment and a minimum wage job. They would spend their lives trying to catch up, trying to build a foundation on shifting sand. I had been given a foundation, a broken, neglected one, but it was solid ground. It was roots. To sell it for cash felt like a betrayal. A betrayal of Eleanor, of my mother, and of the girl I was hoping I could become. This is the kind of moment that defines you, isn't it? The kind of crossroads where you have to choose not just what you want to do, but who you want to be. Have you ever faced a choice like that? One where your head is screaming one thing, and your heart is whispering another? If you have, I hope you'll let me know in the comments. It's in these moments we realize what we're truly made of. For me, standing in that quiet orchard, I felt the conflict tear through me. The fear was real. The money was freedom. But the land was home. I went back inside and reread the last letter I had opened. It was shorter than the others. There is more I have to tell you. Eleanor had written, truths that are difficult. I have left them for you, but not in this house. The heart of this farm and the heart of our story is in the barn. You will know what to do when the time is right. The barn, the locked, silent building that stood like a watchtower at the edge of the property. The heart of the story. My decision crystallized. I couldn't sell. Not yet. Not until I knew everything. My new mission became singular. I had to get inside that barn. The heavy, rusty padlock looked impenetrable. I searched the house again, this time with a specific goal. I looked in every drawer, on every shelf, in every dusty corner for a key. Nothing. I searched the small shed behind the house, finding only rusted garden tools and empty pots. The key wasn't just lying around. Eleanor had hidden it. I sat on the porch steps, frustrated, staring at the barn. It seemed to mock me. I thought about Eleanor's words. You will know what to do when the time is right. It wasn't a treasure map. It was a test of intuition. Where would a woman who loved books and the earth hide something important? I went back to her bedroom. The room was simple, personal. The rocking chair, the handmade quilt, the small bookshelf in the corner. I ran my fingers over the spines of the books. They were mostly classics, poetry, and several thick volumes on agriculture and botany. One book was different. It was a heavy, leather-bound book with no title on the spine. It was just plain, dark leather. I pulled it from the shelf. It was a collection of essays called On Cultivating Roots. It felt significant. I opened it. The pages were filled with thoughtful writing about farming and philosophy. But as I flipped through, I noticed the back of the book felt thicker, uneven. I ran my hand over the inside of the back cover. There was a slight bulge. A section of the thick cardboard had been carefully hollowed out, and nestled inside, wrapped in a small piece of velvet cloth, was another iron key. It was larger than the house key, more ornate. The barn key. My heart hammered in my chest. I ran down the stairs and out the back door, the key clutched in my hand. The grass was long, and I stumbled as I half ran, half walked toward the barn. The late afternoon sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows from the apple trees. The barn loomed larger and larger as I approached. The padlock was cold and gritty with rust. I blew the dust out of the keyhole and slid the key in. It was a perfect fit. With a screech of protesting metal, the lock clicked open. I pulled it free, its weight surprising me. The crossbar was heavy. I had to use both hands to lift it out of its brackets. For a moment, I just stood there, my hand on the massive wooden door. I was about to open the heart of the story. I took a deep breath and pulled. The door groaned open, scraping against the hard-packed dirt floor. A shaft of golden afternoon light cut through the gloom, illuminating a universe of swirling dust motes. The air that rushed out was thick with the scent of old hay, dry earth, and something else, something clean and metallic like oiled tools. As my eyes adjusted to the dimness, the scale of the place took my breath away. The ceiling soared upwards, crisscrossed with massive wooden beams where swallows had built their nests. The main floor was vast and open. To one side, an old, faded red tractor stood silent, looking like a sleeping giant. Along the walls were workbenches, covered in tools that were not rusted, but cleaned, oiled, and hung in neat, orderly rows. There were shovels, hoes, saws, and pruning shears of every size. This wasn't a place of neglect. This was a place of work, preserved with meticulous care. Against the far wall were shelves, reaching all the way to the rafters, and they were filled with glass jars. Hundreds of them. Each one was sealed with wax and carefully labeled in Eleanor's cursive script. I walked closer. They were seeds. Golden Delicious Apple, 1998. Northern Spy, 2005. Honeycrisp, 2012. There were jars of vegetable seeds, flower seeds, herbs. It was a library of life, a genetic ark of everything that had ever grown on this land. This was a fortune, but not the kind the developers understood. This was a legacy of cultivation, a wealth of potential. In the center of the barn, sitting alone like an altar, was a large, heavy, sea-worn wooden chest. It was bound with iron straps and had a heavy latch, but it wasn't locked. With a sense of reverence, I knelt and lifted the lid. The inside was lined with dark velvet, and it was filled with money. Neat, tight bundles of cash, wrapped in paper bands. I lifted one. It was a stack of $100 bills. I counted the bundles. There had to be over $100,000 there. It was a staggering amount. Enough to fix the house, buy a new tractor, to live on for years while I figured out how to bring the orchard back to life. It was a practical fortune, the seed money for a new beginning. Eleanor had left me not just the land, but the means to save it. I ran my hands over the bundles of cash, my mind reeling. This was it. This was the secret. But as I lifted the last layer of money, I saw something else underneath. A thick, heavy envelope made of parchment paper. It was sealed with a wax stamp, an intricate design of a tree. My name was on the front. Just Maya. My breath caught in my throat. This was the final piece, the heart of the story. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and unfolded the letter. The paper was thicker, the ink darker than the others. It felt final. My dearest granddaughter, the letter began. The word stopped my heart. Granddaughter. I read it again, the single word rearranging my entire universe. All the air left my lungs. I sat down hard on the dirt floor of the barn, the letter shaking so badly I could barely read it. I have lived with this truth in silence for your entire life, the letter went on, and it is a heavy burden to pass on to you now. But you are a woman, and you deserve the whole truth, no matter how painful. I was not just your mother's friend, Maya. I am her mother. I am your grandmother. The story she told was one of heartbreak and impossible choices. She had been young when she married a man who seemed charming but was, in secret, a violent, controlling monster. When her daughter, Sarah, was born, Eleanor's world narrowed to a single purpose: protecting her. She endured years of abuse, planning her escape. When Sarah was a teenager, she fell in love and became pregnant with me. My father, the letter explained, was a good boy who was killed in a car accident before I was born. Sarah was devastated, and her father's rage and abuse escalated, turning on her and her unborn child. He saw you as another mouth to feed, another chain to bind us to him, Eleanor wrote. I knew he would hurt you both. There was no question. I had saved a little money, and one night, while he was passed out, I took Sarah and we ran. We made it to the city, but we had nothing. We were terrified he would find us. Sarah was fragile, grieving, and on the verge of giving birth. We knew we couldn't give you a safe life on the run. So we made the most painful decision of our lives. We found a private adoption agency. We created a story that Sarah was a young girl alone, with no family to help her. We gave you up, my love, not because we didn't want you, but because it was the only way we could save you. We gave you a chance at a life free from a shadow. The barn was silent save for the sound of my own ragged breathing, the sound of my sobs echoing in the high rafters. Every story I had ever told myself about my life was a lie. I wasn't abandoned. I was protected. I wasn't unwanted. I was the product of a desperate, sacrificial love. Sarah never recovered, the letter concluded. Her heart was broken. She passed away less than 2 years later from pneumonia, but I know she truly died of grief. I took what little money we had left, and I came here to my family's old farm. I changed my name. I hid, and I began to wait. I promised my daughter on her deathbed that I would find you again one day, that I would give you back the home you were meant to have. This land, this house, this money, it is your birthright. It is the legacy of a love that was too fierce for this world. What you do with it is your choice. You can sell it and walk away, and no one would blame you. You would be free, or you can stay. You can put down roots in this soil and build a life. You can let our story grow into something new. The choice, my little sparrow, has always been yours. I sat there on the floor of the barn for hours, the letter in my lap, as the sun went down and the barn filled with deep blue shadows. I cried for the grandmother I never knew, for the mother whose face I couldn't remember, for the baby who was given away so she could live. I cried for the 18 years of loneliness, of feeling like a clerical error in the world's filing cabinet. But these tears were different. They weren't tears of self-pity. They were tears of grief and of a profound, earth-shattering gratitude. I finally understood. The fortune in the barn wasn't the money. It was the truth. The truth was my inheritance. The truth had set me free. The next morning, I woke up in Eleanor's bed, but for the first time, it felt like my bed. The house didn't feel like it was waiting anymore. It felt like it had exhaled. I walked through the rooms, touching the furniture, looking out the windows. I saw not a dilapidated farmhouse, but a project. Not a burden, but a purpose. I went outside and stood at the edge of the orchard. The trees were a tangled mess, but they were alive. They were survivors, just like me. I knew what I had to do. I went inside and called Mr. Davies. When he answered, I didn't hesitate. Mr. Davies, I said, my voice clear and steady. It's Maya, Alistair. I've made my decision. Yes, he said, a note of gentle curiosity in his voice. Please inform Oakview Development that their offer is rejected. The property is not for sale. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint smile in his voice when he finally spoke. I will be happy to do that, Maya. Is there anything else I can help you with? Yes, I said. I need the name of a good contractor. And can you recommend a nursery that sells heritage apple saplings? There's a tree I need to plant for my 19th birthday. My new life began that day. The work was harder than anything I had ever imagined. The first few months were a blur of pulling weeds, learning about soil pH, and watching endless online videos about how to prune apple trees. I hired a local contractor, a gruff but fair man named George, who helped me fix the porch and patch the roof. He taught me how to use a power drill and how to tell the difference between a load-bearing wall and one I could knock down. I took the old tractor to the town mechanic, a young woman named Chloe, who spent a week with me teaching me how to maintain the engine. Slowly, the community of Northwood Creek began to see me not as a strange outsider, but as that Vance girl, the one who was crazy enough to try and bring the old orchard back. I used some of the money from the chest to buy what I needed, but I was careful. It was a tool, not a solution. The real work had to be done by my own two hands. There were days of overwhelming frustration, days when I would sit on the porch, covered in dirt and sweat, and think about the easy life I had turned down. But then I would look at the progress I had made, a newly painted wall, a row of prune trees, a small vegetable garden I had planted near the house, and I would feel a sense of pride that was deeper and more satisfying than any amount of money could have been. I was building something. I was honoring the women who came before me. I never told anyone the full story of Eleanor and Sarah. It was a private, sacred thing, but I felt their presence everywhere. In the warmth of the sun on my back as I worked in the orchard, in the taste of the first apple one picked from a tree that had been neglected for years, in the quiet evenings, sitting in Eleanor's rocking chair, reading her books. I wasn't alone anymore. I was part of a lineage. Home, I learned, isn't just a place you live. It's a story you belong to. For 18 years, my story was about being left behind. But Eleanor gave me a new one. A story about being protected, being loved, and being found. It's a story I am still writing every day with every seed I plant and every branch I prune. It's not an easy life, but it is a beautiful one, and it is mine. What this journey has taught me, more than anything, is that our past doesn't have to define our future. The stories we are told about ourselves, especially when we are young, are not always the true ones. We have the power to find the truth, to reclaim our history, and to build a new legacy on the foundations of the old. It's about choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. It's about cultivating your own roots, even in the most difficult soil. Thank you for being here and for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, if you've ever had to redefine what family or home means to you, I'd be honored if you shared a piece of your own story in the comments below. This is a community for people who understand that the most valuable inheritances are the ones you can't put a price on. And if you want to follow my journey as I continue to bring this orchard and myself back to life, please subscribe.
Oh my god, looks like we have two. Oh, we have Umbreon. Hell yeah. And Leafeon. Wait, that's so cool. Okay. Wait, cool. Alright. Also, thanks, Hard Eyes. Appreciate it. Wait, and Leafeon. I do like Leafeon. I feel like Leafeon and Glaceon were, like, I feel like they're overlooked a lot of times, but I do like those two. Ooh, recipe. Okay. Love a wall torch. Their shinies deserve better colors. I agree, David. It's crazy too, because like, I feel like Umbreon and Espeon have such like great distinct shinies. And then like Leafeon and Glaceon just aren't as great. Glaceon is my favorite. Her design is so cute. Glaceon is really good. Okay, level 2. Okay. I'm like, what's the other? Okay, so we unlocked an Eevee doll. Oh, and a dowsing machine. Also, hey, kitchen sink, good to see ya. How's your day been? Let's see.